Some people walk into our lives like shadows, silent, unnoticed, almost invisible. We pass them every day, never realizing they carry storms, secrets, and truths that could shatter everything we think we know. This is the story of one such shadow, an elderly woman everyone ignored, everyone overlooked, except for one person. Every morning the protagonist handed her a few coins, never expecting anything in return, never imagining that this simple act of kindness would open the gates to a hidden battlefield. But one day, the old lady lifted her head, her voice trembling yet powerful, and spoke words that ripped the world open. Words that exposed betrayal. Words that revealed danger lurking closer than breath. Words that came not from a stranger, but from someone who had been silently guarding a promise made decades ago. This is not just a story of kindness. It is not just a story of betrayal. This is a story of awakening, of vengeance, of a quiet warrior rising from the dust to reclaim the life that was stolen from them. And the key to this revenge was hidden in the hands of a forgotten woman the world never bothered to see. Stay with this story until the end, because what begins as a simple coin dropped into an old palm becomes a storm of truth, justice, and unstoppable revenge that will make your heart race, your mind spin, and your spirit roar. She had passed the old lady 1,000 times before ever realizing she had become part of the woman's silent world. Every morning, in the rush of noise, traffic, and life grinding forward, there she was, small, frail, wrapped in layers of fading clothes, sitting on the same cracked corner like a forgotten ghost. The protagonist never asked for a name, never asked for a story. She simply dropped change into the woman's trembling hands and moved on. But there was something about that old woman that pierced deeper than simple pity. Her eyes, hollow yet watchful, followed the protagonist with a quiet intensity, as if holding words she wasn't ready to release. Day after day, those eyes spoke louder than her silence, sorrow, fear, and a strange kind of understanding. The protagonist didn't know why she felt drawn to help her, why she felt a pull to protect someone she had never spoken to. But every morning she found herself slowing her steps, offering more, staying longer. There was a heaviness around the woman, a weight that didn't belong to ordinary hardship, almost as if she carried secrets too dangerous to let loose. And though she never uttered a word, her expression shifted every time the protagonist approached relief, recognition, and something else, warning. It was subtle, buried beneath wrinkles and exhaustion, but undeniable. The protagonist sensed it in the way the woman looked at her change, then at her face, then quickly away, as though afraid someone might see. Other pedestrians ignored her, dismissing her as nothing more than another broken soul in a broken world. But the protagonist saw the truth. This woman wasn't just begging for survival. She was waiting, watching, measuring time. And the protagonist couldn't shake the feeling that the old lady knew her, or knew something about her. Every coin dropped into her cup felt like a silent agreement, a link being forged between two lives that weren't supposed to cross, but somehow were destined to collide. The old lady's sadness wasn't the sadness of poverty. It was the sadness of someone holding a story too painful, too dangerous, too heavy to share. A story she carried like a wound, bleeding beneath the surface. And every day, the protagonist walked away feeling the weight of eyes burning into her back. Not with malice, but with urgency, with a truth begging to break free. Then one morning, as the sky hung gray and the sidewalks smelled of rain, the old lady lifted her head, slowly, deliberately, and as the protagonist reached out with her usual handful of change, the trembling hand didn't rise to take it. The old woman instead grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, eyes blazing with something fierce and terrifying. And for the first time the silence shattered. The woman knew her. The woman had always known her. And the woman had something to say. Something that would rip the protagonist's life open, expose lies she never suspected, and drag her into a storm she never imagined. But that moment, the pause before the confession, was the last breath of her old life. Because the woman's story wasn't random, wasn't accidental, wasn't a coincidence. She had been waiting for the right moment to speak, and the truth she carried was about to turn the protagonist's world into a battlefield. The morning the old lady finally stopped the protagonist was the moment the truth shattered the fragile silence of their routine, a silence built on coins dropped into trembling hands and polite nods exchanged like passing shadows. But this time, her hand didn't reach out for money. It gripped the protagonist's wrist with surprising force, her frail fingers cold but commanding, her cloudy eyes suddenly focused with a terrifying clarity. In a voice that trembled with age but burned with urgency, she whispered a truth the protagonist was never meant to hear, a truth so sharp it sliced through the morning air like broken glass. She said she knew them, knew the protagonist's family, knew the house they lived in, the car they drove, the person they trusted most. And then, with words heavy enough to crush the strongest soul, she revealed what she had been carrying inside her for years. She had been watching, listening, witnessing things that were never meant for daylight. She'd seen the protagonist's spouse meeting strangers behind closed doors. She'd watched a sibling hide money and documents that didn't belong to them. She'd noticed a coworker trailing the protagonist home with intentions far darker than jealousy. Her confession was not soft, not gentle. It was a warning forged in fear. A confession delivered by someone who had risked her life holding secrets that powerful, dangerous people wanted buried. She told stories of whispered threats she overheard while sitting invisibly on sidewalks, of arguments inside cars she recognized from the protagonist's driveway, of late-night visits where voices mentioned the protagonist's name with venom and greed. Every word she spoke peeled back another layer of betrayal, exposing an underworld of lies hiding behind familiar faces. And the protagonist, frozen in the street with cars rushing past and people brushing by, felt their world tilt, buckle, and collapse. How could a stranger, a beggar they barely knew, hold the keys to such devastating truths? How could she know the secret wounds the protagonist had ignored for months? The old lady continued, her voice breaking as she confessed that she kept silent because speaking meant danger. Danger from those who used her invisibility to plot their sins. But today, she said, she could no longer stay quiet. Today she saw something that forced her hand. She saw the person the protagonist trusted most exchanging envelopes, laughing with someone who intended to destroy their life piece by piece. And with that final confession, she looked up and said, "They are not who you think they are, and if you don't act now, you will lose everything." It wasn't just a confession. It was a warning, a revelation, a turning point, and it struck with the force of a storm the protagonist never saw coming. The moment the old lady finished speaking, the protagonist felt the world around them dissolve into raw, icy awareness, the kind of awareness that only comes when betrayal finally steps out of the shadows and stares you in the face. As the truth settled in their chest like a stone too heavy to carry, they began piecing together every strange moment they had ignored. Every unexplained late-night absence, every missing dollar, every whisper that died as they walked into a room, every subtle insult disguised as a joke, every cold shoulder that had once been warm. But now, with the old lady's confession echoing like thunder in their ears, the protagonist saw the pattern clearly for the first time. Betrayal wasn't a sudden strike. It was a slow poisoning, a drip of deception hidden inside familiar voices and trusted hands. And as they dug deeper, everything the old woman said unfolded into harsh, undeniable truth. Bank statements showed transactions they never authorized, leading to accounts they didn't know existed. Messages on a phone they borrowed accidentally revealed conversations dripping with manipulation. A locked drawer cracked open to expose documents forged with the protagonist's name. And in the middle of it all was the person they trusted most. The one who smiled at breakfast, kissed them goodbye, and plotted behind their back with cold, blooded precision. The more the protagonist investigated, the more horrifying the betrayal became. The spouse wasn't simply lying. They were preparing to drain accounts and run. The sibling wasn't simply jealous. They were stealing inheritance and framing the protagonist for the missing funds. The coworker wasn't simply envious, they were ready to sabotage their career and take their place. Each layer of deceit exposed a deeper level of cruelty, revealing a conspiracy built over years, not days. The protagonist realized the old lady hadn't just witnessed betrayal. She had witnessed a crime unfolding in silence. A crime she was terrified to speak about because the ones involved believed no one would ever listen to someone like her. But she listened. She watched, and now she had passed the torch of truth into the protagonist's hands. The betrayal cut deep. It wasn't just about money or secrets. It was about trust shredded, loyalty twisted into a weapon, love turned into camouflage for greed. It was about the realization that the world you built with someone could be nothing more than a stage set built to collapse the moment they chose to strike. And in that devastation, something fierce was born inside the protagonist. A fire sharpened by pain, fueled by clarity, and aimed toward justice. Because betrayal that deep doesn't end in silence. It demands consequences, it demands reckoning. And now that the truth had risen, nothing, absolutely nothing, would stop the protagonist from turning that betrayal into the most powerful revenge their enemies had ever faced. The protagonist stood frozen, the cold wind brushing against their skin as the old lady's trembling voice cut through years of silence. She didn't look like someone capable of holding secrets that could shatter worlds, yet her eyes carried the weight of decades. Eyes that had seen too much, survived too much, and remembered everything. When she finally whispered that she once knew the protagonist's late parent, the ground almost shifted beneath their feet. Suddenly, this woman, this quiet stranger the protagonist had passed by every morning, was no longer just a beggar on a corner. She became a living vault of hidden truth. She told the protagonist that their parent was not just a familiar face from her past. They were bound by loyalty, by friendship, by a promise made in the darkest chapter of their lives. She spoke of the parents' courage, how they had once saved her from a situation so dangerous, so cruel. She still woke up shaking at night, and in return she made a vow sealed with gratitude, loyalty, and unbreakable resolve. She promised that if their child ever faced danger, betrayal, or a threat that crept too close, she would step out of the shadows and protect them, even if it cost her everything. Her voice wavered as she admitted that she had been watching from afar. Not in a creepy way, but like a silent guardian forced to stay invisible. She explained how she had recognized the protagonist the first time they dropped change into her trembling hands. She didn't speak then, not because she didn't want to, but because the danger lurking around them wasn't fully formed yet. She could sense it, smell it, feel it like a storm brewing in the air. Something, or someone, was circling the protagonist's life with poisonous intent, and she knew that revealing herself too soon could destroy everything. But now, things had escalated. The old lady said she had spent weeks debating whether to intervene, but the signs had grown too clear, too dangerous to ignore. She had noticed shadows trailing the protagonist home. She had overheard hushed conversations, seen familiar faces in places they didn't belong, and recognized a pattern she had witnessed once before. Before the protagonist's parent died under suspicious circumstances no one ever questioned. She knew the smell of betrayal, the taste of danger, and she knew that history was repeating itself. Her hands shook as she confessed that the betrayal targeting the protagonist was not new. It was a continuation of the same threat that once targeted their parent. She said the same enemy who tried to destroy the parent now had their eyes locked on the protagonist. And this time, they were moving faster, bolder, more recklessly. The old lady's voice hardened, filled with fire that age could not extinguish, as she admitted that she couldn't stay silent any longer. She had waited, observed, and prepared. But the moment she saw the protagonist's world being chipped away from the inside, she knew the time had come to fulfill her promise. She looked at the protagonist with fierce determination and said, "Your parents saved me. I owe them my life, and now Now I protect you." The protagonist's breath caught in their throat, their minds spinning as the world around them reassembled into something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. The old lady wasn't a stranger in need. She was a guardian in disguise, a witness to secrets buried long ago, and the key to understanding the storm rising around them. What she was about to reveal next would destroy everything the protagonist thought they knew. The old woman's voice trembled as she spoke, but her words hit with the force of a thunderstorm. For days, weeks, months, the protagonist had dropped spare coins into her paper cup, thinking she was just another forgotten soul on the streets, someone broken by life, someone surviving quietly in the margins. But the moment she grabbed the protagonist's wrist and whispered, "I knew your father. I made him a promise," everything shifted. Suddenly, she wasn't just an old lady begging for change. She was a hidden guardian, a living memory, a silent witness who had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. Her eyes carried decades of secrets, dark, heavy, and impossible to ignore. She explained how long ago, before tragedy took the protagonist's parent, she was their closest confidant. She had seen their battles, their sacrifices, and the enemies that circled them like vultures. She had watched the parent fight alone while protecting their child from threats they could never fully reveal. And before the end came, before death claimed them far too early, they made her swear one thing: "If danger ever shadows my child, you must step in. You must protect them when I no longer can." The protagonist stood frozen, stunned by the sudden collision between past and present. This was no coincidence. This woman had not been sitting on that same corner every day by accident. She had been keeping watch, quietly observing, silently studying, always waiting. She was the eyes the parent left behind, the promise carved into time, the last line of defense when all others failed. She revealed moments the protagonist never knew about. The kindness of the parent, the enemies they collected, the silent threats that never fully died. She spoke of letters the parent wrote but never sent, warnings they hoped their child would one day understand. And with every passing word, the protagonist's world cracked open wider. This old woman, this unnoticed figure on the street, held pieces of a truth that could not be denied. Then she leaned forward and whispered the words that cut the deepest. "You are in danger, and it has already begun." A chill tore down the protagonist's spine as the old woman's confession poured out like a long, sealed dam breaking. She explained how she had watched someone in the protagonist's life, someone close, someone trusted, slowly slither into betrayal. She had seen the lies forming, the manipulation growing, the deception tightening its grip, and she had stayed silent only because she hoped it was a mistake. But now, with danger finally in full shadow, she could no longer keep the truth hidden. She was stepping forward because the promise demanded it. For the protagonist, the revelation was both heartbreak and ignition. Their parent had never truly left them. Even in death, they had placed protection around their child. Even in silence, they had a guardian waiting. And now, as the old woman stared into their eyes with raw urgency, the protagonist felt something awaken inside, a fire born of truth, lineage, and betrayal. Someone had been playing a dangerous game behind their back. Someone thought their secrets would stay buried. But now the parent's promise was alive again, and the protagonist was no longer in the dark. This was more than a warning. It was the beginning of war. The old woman didn't rely on empty claims or broken memories. She came armed with evidence so sharp it could pierce through any lie. With trembling hands but a fierce gaze, she pulled out a small, worn leather pouch from her tattered coat. Inside it lay the truth, undeniable, unfiltered, and terrifyingly precise. She had spent years collecting it, hiding it, guarding it like sacred treasure, and now it was time to reveal everything. First came the documents, bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, transfers, and forged signatures that belonged to someone the protagonist trusted. Then came photographs, grainy but unmistakable, capturing meetings, exchanges, and secret conversations that destroyed every illusion of loyalty. Next, She presented recordings, whispered confessions captured at night, threats spoken in hushed tones, phone calls filled with plans of betrayal. Each piece of evidence felt like a blade, slicing through denial. She had infiltrated spaces unnoticed, watched from alleyways, followed patterns others ignored. People overlooked her because she looked fragile and visible, the perfect cloak for gathering truth. She had been documenting everything the betrayer had done, waiting for the moment the protagonist was strong enough to hear it. And now, as she spread the evidence across the table, it formed a story too dark to dismiss. The betrayer had been targeting the protagonist from the beginning, plotting to take their inheritance, sabotage their relationships, tear apart their stability, and isolate them completely. They thought no one was watching. They thought they were brilliant, untouchable, invisible. But the old woman had seen it all. She had been the shadow behind their shadow, the silent storm waiting for the right strike. The protagonist felt fury rising, sharp, cold, and controlled. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't imagination. This was betrayal captured in full color. The proof was undeniable. The old woman's evidence wasn't just information. It was ammunition, enough to destroy the betrayer completely. Enough to turn the tables. Enough to begin the vengeance they deserved. And as the old woman closed the final recording and whispered, "Your parent trusted me. Now you must trust yourself," the protagonist knew it. Revenge was no longer a choice. It was destiny. 3. Revenge unleashed 600 words, strong words, armed with the truth and burning with purpose. The protagonist no longer walked like a victim. They moved like a storm. The betrayal that once weakened them now sharpened them. Every lie exposed became a weapon. Every truth revealed became armor. And with the old woman's guidance, they crafted a revenge so calculated, so precise, that the betrayer never saw the trap closing around them. The protagonist struck first by letting the betrayer believe nothing had changed. They smiled, nodded, played along, pretending to be the same clueless target. But behind the scenes, they wired devices, backed up files, contacted people the betrayer wanted silenced, and positioned every piece of evidence exactly where it needed to land. And then, at the perfect moment, they unleashed the truth. The betrayer's darkest deeds exploded into the world. Coworkers saw their corruption. Family learned their disloyalty. Friends discovered their cruelty. Authorities received the documents they never expected. Every mask the betrayer wore ripped apart in public view. Their reputation collapsed. Their power evaporated. Their confidence shattered into dust. They tried to deny it. They tried to scream. They tried to twist the story. But the evidence was too overwhelming, too detailed, too perfectly delivered. As their life crumbled, the protagonist stood tall, not broken, not shaken, but reborn in strength. The old lady watched with quiet pride. The promise she made long ago now fulfilled. The protagonist didn't just protect themselves. They honored their parents' memory, restored their family's dignity, and proved that betrayal never wins when truth is armed with courage. The betrayer was exposed, humiliated, and stripped of every weapon they once used against the protagonist. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered with precision, purpose, and poetic balance. And as the protagonist walked away, the old woman whispered, "Your parent would be proud." The war was over. The promise was kept. And the protagonist emerged victorious, stronger than ever, unstoppable, and finally free. In the end, justice did not come crashing down in chaos. It arrived with precision, clarity, and a force powerful enough to shake every lie that had been built against the protagonist. The old lady's quiet wisdom, her unbroken loyalty, and her unwavering courage became the very backbone of the final strike. Together, they executed a plan that didn't simply expose the betrayer. It destroyed the web of manipulation that had been suffocating the protagonist for years. The moment of reckoning came like a storm disguised as sunlight. 1 second the betrayer stood tall, smug, confident, fully convinced they had complete control. The next second, their own words, their own actions, their own schemes were played before a room full of witnesses. Every piece of stolen money, every document forged, every conversation recorded, every lie whispered in the dark, it all surfaced with merciless clarity. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The betrayer faced exactly what they had earned: humiliation, exposure, consequences, and the collapse of everything they tried to use to hurt someone who had only shown them trust. As the truth echoed across the room, the protagonist didn't need to say a single word. Their silence was louder than any shout. Their strength was brighter than any apology the betrayer tried to offer. And when authority stepped in, when justice finally claimed what rightfully belonged to it, the protagonist felt the weight of years lifting off their chest. For the first time in forever, they could breathe without fear. They could walk without watching their back. They could live without doubting their worth. And when the protagonist turned to the old lady, the woman who had been invisible to the world but had held their destiny in her quiet hands, they understood something: life, changing. Sometimes the angels God sends don't have wings. Sometimes they sit quietly on sidewalks, waiting for the moment they are needed most. The old lady smiled, not with victory, but with peace. She had kept her promise. She had honored the memory of the protagonist's parent. She had protected the child she vowed to watch over. And now, she could finally rest knowing her mission was fulfilled. The protagonist didn't walk away the same person. They walked away stronger, sharper, fearless. Betrayal didn't break them, it built them. Pain didn't crush them, it refined them. And revenge didn't poison them, it empowered them with the truth, with justice, and with a future no enemy could ever steal again. And as their new chapter began, one thing became clear: sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unexpected allies. Sometimes the smallest kindness ignites the strongest protection. And sometimes the person the world overlooks becomes the one who saves your entire life. If this story pulled you in, if it made your heart pound, your mind race, and your spirit rise, then don't leave without hitting subscribe, because more stories of strength, justice, and unexpected heroes are coming your way. Stay with us. Don't miss the next twist or the next victory.